Hector! Hector!
Yeah.
See if I'm in focus. Like, make sure like my head and stuff are all in the shot.
Yeah, you're good. Your shirt is inside out.
My shirt is not inside out. It's called fashion. That's the way it's designed. Mr. I'm gonna wear the same outfit for 26 years.
It's not an outfit, it's a uniform.
Same difference. Am I good?
You're good.
Okay. Alright, go. You need to get some fashion. Hi, my name is Marta, and I am the chef and author of Sense and Edibility, a site where I teach you everything I know about cooking, baking, and cocktail making. And today's video is all about my favorite dough in the whole wide world, puff pastry. Now, puff pastry is a workhorse in the kitchen. You can use it to make breakfast pastries, hors d'oeuvres, to top chicken pot pies, to make beef Wellington. You can also use it to make tons of desserts like Napoleons, turnovers, which could also double as breakfast. Yeah, puff pastry does everything short of paying your mortgage. Every month I make a huge batch of puff pastry so that I can use it throughout the month when I'm kind of, scrambling for a dessert to make or a breakfast to make. It is an amazing thing to keep in your freezer. And at this point in our economy, it is now cheaper to make your puff pastry at home than it is to buy it frozen. Adulthood sucks. A box of puff pastry here in Texas now runs me $5.50. It used to be like $3. It didn't always make sense to make my puff pastry from scratch. Now it does, because with the recipe that I'm about to show you, you can get 4.5 pounds of puff pastry, which is enough to make 4 different recipes. So before we get into the video, I would love it if you subscribe to my channel by clicking the subscribe. The button down below that says subscribe, and also sign up for notifications so that you can get notified every time I post a new video, because after I post this video, I'm going to create a playlist of recipes to use your puff pastry in, so you don't want to miss that. Yeah, so that's it. So here's how I make my puff pastry dough. The first thing you need to do for puff pastry is make the beurrage, or the butter layer. And this begins with 6 sticks of butter. That's 3 cups of butter, or 680 grams. And you want to use unsalted butter, but you want the butter to be at room temperature. To the butter, you're going to add a 1/2 cup, or 60 grams of bread flour, 1 teaspoon or 5 milliliters of freshly squeezed lemon juice, and finally 1/2 teaspoon or 3 grams of kosher salt. Now, you can do this with a hand mixer, and I actually recommend that if you're not very dexterous with your hands or you have arthritis. But I like to do it because I have anger issues and I like taking it out on the butter. What you want to do is mash the flour into the butter, making sure no clumps of butter remain. So you need to make it extra smooth. Once you're done, scrape off the excess butter and just return it back to the bowl. And then you're going to chill the butter while you make your next layer. The next layer is called the Détrempe, or the dough layer, and that begins with 4.5 cups or 585 grams of all-purpose flour. You're also going to need 2 cups of bread flour, that's 280 grams. Also 1 tablespoon or 15 grams of kosher salt. And the salt you can decrease to 2 teaspoons, which is 12 grams if you're following a low sodium diet. Use your hands to combine the 2 flours and the salt together until everything is very well combined. Next, you're going to add a 1/2 cup, which is 1 stick or 113 grams of unsalted butter, but this butter needs to be very cold, unlike the butter for the beurrage. You could also, instead of dicing it, shred it, which is something that I prefer because it makes cutting it into the flour a lot easier. This is what I'm doing with my fingers. I'm cutting the fat into the flour so that the flour coats the fat. You want the texture or the consistency to be that of very coarse cornmeal. And once that's finished, you're going to add to the bowl 2¼ cups or 560 milliliters of ice water. You want this water to be super cold. Pour it around on top of the flour and just use your fingers to toss the flour and the water together. As you knead the water into the flour, you're going to find that it's going to start to come together. You don't want any loose pieces of flour to remain. Now what you're going to want to do is just give this 1 or 2 kneads on the countertop. It shouldn't stick at all. And that's how you know that you have the right consistency. But also you're going to notice that it's starting to pull back on you. That's the gluten that you developed when you added the water and started kneading. So what you want to do is wrap this in plastic wrap and chill it for about 10 to 15 minutes to let that gluten relax. After 10 to 15 minutes, dust your countertop and the top of the dough with all-purpose flour and use a heavy rolling pin. I'm using a marble rolling pin to roll out my dough into a 20 by 15 inch rectangle. Measurements aren't hard and fast here. You just want to create a large enough rectangle to fold the fat in. Now I'm making sure that my dough isn't sticking to the bottom, and I'm going to add that beurrage that I created earlier. All I'm going to do is put it on 2/3 of the Détrempe or the dough layer. Apologies for not getting the full shot, but you know, I'm a chef, not a videographer. Smooth that out so that the butter layer only covers 2/3 of the dough. You want to be gentle with this because you don't want to tear the dough layer beneath the butter layer. You also want to make sure that your butter layer, it's one even layer. It's not, you know, it doesn't have peaks and valleys. It's more important here for you to create an even beurrage than it is to work fast. So take your time. There's no prizes for being first. Once your beurrage has been spread out on 2/3 of the dough, you're going to fold over the unbuttered portion of dough onto the third that is touching it. Try to make the seam or the edge of the dough layer as straight as possible and then fold over the buttered part on the right side. And you want to kind of seal it so that when you go to roll it, the butter doesn't kind of ooze out. Lay this onto a sheet pan with wax paper and cover it in plastic wrap so it doesn't dry out while it's chilling. You need to chill this for about 20 to 25 minutes. You can even go up to 30. After it's chilled and the dough has relaxed, put it onto a floured surface and roll it out into another rectangle. Now, every time you roll out this dough, the length will become the width. So the short ends will be on left and right, and you're going to roll it out, and then you're going to fold it in. You're going to fold the right side into the center of the rectangle and fold the left side to meet the right side. Try to make it as even as possible, and you can stretch the dough just a little bit to make sure the seam is nice and straight, and then fold it over like you're closing a book. Press one finger into the dough to let you know that this is your first 4-fold turn. Chill it for 25 minutes and repeat the process. Remember, the length becomes the width. Before you fold the sides into the center, try to brush or dust off as much of the flour as possible because you don't want to add extra gluten to this process. You also don't want it to dry out. Bring your dough into the center on both sides, making sure you try to keep the edges as straight as possible, and then fold it closed like a book. Always remember to mark your turn so you don't get lost. This puff pastry recipe requires 3 4-fold turns, And that's what this process is. When we fold in the sides to the center and then we close it like a book, that is called a fourfold. This just creates dozens and dozens of layers. And using our fingers to mark it helps us keep track. Now, after the final fourfold turn, chill it and cut it into 4 portions. And you can see the layers in the dough. Now, to store it, you want to wrap it in plastic film. And then what I usually do is I transfer my plastic wrap portions of puff pastry into a freezer storage bag and freeze it for up to 6 months. Now, I just want to show you what this looks like once you're ready to make it. You're going to roll it out onto a floured surface. Roll your dough. Try not to press too hard because you don't want to smush the layers together. And that's why that heavy rolling pin really helps. But roll out the dough. Now, normally I wouldn't, be just rolling out dough and cutting it for no reason. But I do want to show you what these layers look like after the puff pastry is completely finished. So that's not wrinkles in my puff pastry. Those are the actual layers of dough and fat that we've created in this recipe. So, yeah. Always use a very sharp knife, or what I'm using here is a pastry wheel, to cut the, ragged edges off of your puff pastry. If you use a dull knife, it's just going to seal the layers of dough and fat, and you're not going to get as much rise. So all I'm doing is cutting this just so I can bake it off and, flex on you one time with the layers of my puff pastry. If you find that your knife or your pastry cutter or your pastry wheel is getting stuck, just wipe off the blade. Once you see how high these bake up, you'll realize that you can use this puff pastry recipe for any recipe that calls for puff pastry. I bake my puff pastry most often at 400 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 204 degrees Celsius. But again, just follow the recipe and bake at the temperature that the recipe author instructs you to bake at. And let's just pretend that I'm not taking forever to put these pieces of puff pastry on the sheet pan. Thanks. And this is what my final puff pastry looks like. This was baked in a 400 degree oven for 20 minutes. And you can see that there's some insane layers in that puff pastry. And always, puff pastry should be flaky. And if it doesn't flake like this, you didn't do it right. And as you can see, I did it right. The science behind this is really intriguing because the water in the butter, as soon as it hits that 400 degree oven, it just evaporates into nothingness. And that's what causes those layers that you can clearly see. And as I'm pulling apart this puff pastry, which by the way, I did eat, I did not waste these crumbs. You just develop this amazingly flaky pastry. Okay, so let's check out our final result. Look. From 1/4 of an inch to about an inch. Not a bad gig, right? And flakiness is always important. I feel it's flaky. Yeah, it's flaky. Look at those layers. While I finish swallowing, let me answer some frequently asked questions I get about my puff pastry recipe. Now, what I've heard a lot of people say about why they don't want to make puff pastry at home is because it takes too long, which if you take out all of the time that is necessary for you to chill the dough in between folds, you're only looking at about an hour's worth of work. Maybe an hour's worth of work is still too much for you, but I'm worth it. I mean, me and my whole crew are worth it, so I think you're worth it too. But no, it doesn't take that long to make puff pastry from scratch. It's just the process of having to wait for the dough to chill so that you don't get frustrated when you try to roll it out. And you can do that, put it in the fridge, let it chill, go do some laundry, roll it out, fold it, put it back in the fridge, go, yell at your husband for leaving socks on the ground when you were doing laundry, go back, roll it out, get stuff done in between waiting for the dough to chill. So it doesn't really take that much time or that much effort. And the result is a super flaky, buttery puff pastry that is out of this world. And the frozen does not compare to fresh homemade puff pastry by a long shot. You're gonna see when you taste it. This has to be the number one question that I get. Why did my puff pastry rise when I baked it? Usually that is the result of not cutting it with a sharp enough knife. I use a very long carving knife actually, and it's very, very sharp, but it's also long enough so that I can get through in one swipe of the knife. You can also use a very sharp pizza cutter or a pastry wheel, which looks, hold on, I will give you. Pastry wheel, pizza cutter. So a pastry wheel usually has two wheels. One is fluted and one isn't. You can use this for raviolis and pasta, but these are the differences between a pizza cutter and a pastry wheel. If they're super sharp, use this wheel, not the fluted one. As long as they're super sharp, they're gonna go, cut and move on. What you don't want to do when you're cutting your puff pastry for whatever you're going to use it for is drag your knife through it or use a dull knife, because then that seals those layers of fat and dough, like it goes like that instead of leaving it like this. And that's not likely to change once it gets into the oven. So if your puff pastry didn't rise like mine did, you seal the edges. Puff pastry is traditionally made with butter. Sometimes in professional bakeries, we use a butter blend, but it's made for commercial use, so you won't find it in grocery stores. You could, don't use this, no. So, yeah, don't use margarine or lard or any butter substitutes. Puff pastry is known to be buttery and flaky, and though you could get the same results with lard, you won't have that flavor, and you definitely can't use it for anything sweet. So you might as well just, stick with butter. It is the best option, best fat for this recipe. No. Because you can't make this a low-fat recipe. It's butter, and you see how many, there's 6 sticks of butter sandwiched by carbs. I mean, this is one of those situations where I'm gonna be your homegirl, and I'm gonna tell you, just enjoy this, okay? It's in moderation. Of course, I don't eat puff pastry every day, nor do I serve it to my family every day. We may eat it once a week. We do eat it once a week, but we don't eat it every day. This is not something that you can make low fat and it still do what it's supposed to do or taste the way it's supposed to taste. So don't try it. Just enjoy it. Just let's not think about what we just put in it. It's all healthy. It's all, I mean, we can name what it is, right? We're not adding any chemicals or preservatives or anything funky. So it's healthy. It's wholesome. We know what's in it. And we're going to enjoy it, right? Let's say it together. We're going to use the butter and we're not going to think about how many calories is in this recipe. Okay? All right. Thank you. Love you. The reason why I use two different types of flours, like I said, I need one that is middle of the road protein versus one that is low in protein so that I can get the stretch that I need in the dough so that when I'm rolling it doesn't tear. If you're using something like a soft flour and you're using just like cake flour, which has a very low protein content, your dough is not going to stretch as much because it's not developing as much gluten. So that's why I use a combination. And I also don't want like bread consistency in my puff pastry. I want it to be as flaky as you saw it was. As flaky as me. To store your puff pastry, you're going to divide it into equal parts. If you want to make a larger portion if you want to use a larger piece of dough, you're going to cut it into thirds. You could cut it in half. I don't like freezing my puff pastry in large blocks because if I don't use it, I waste it. So what I always do is I cut this recipe into fourths. And if I need something where I want to make a dozen pastries, I'll take out 2 bricks and that's what I'll use for the pastries. But what you want to do is after you cut it with a very sharp knife, you want to wrap it in plastic film. You want to, protect it from the air so it doesn't dry out. And then put it in a food storage bag and you can freeze it for up to 6 months. All you need to do is thaw it in the refrigerator before you get ready to use it. You can also store it wrapped in plastic film in the refrigerator for 3 days. I've noticed that after 5, right? I've noticed that at 4-ish days, it starts to turn gray because the water that mixed with the flour is doing what it does and the flour is going bad. So I always say 3 days. You could stretch it up to 5, but I wouldn't because it just looks funky. But yeah, that's how you store your puff pastry. Always freeze it if you don't think you're going to use it within 3 days or 4 days. Don't go past 5. Puff pastry can be used for anything. As I said in the beginning of the video, sweets, hors d'oeuvres, you can make cheese straws, you can wrap puff pastry in goat cheese stuffed dates in puff pastry and bake them. There's a recipe for that on my site. You can make morning pastries like quesitos, which are a very popular Puerto Rican cream cheese filled pastry. Another recipe that's on my site. And by the way, that's like #1 on Google. Pastelillos de guayaba are puff pastry turnovers with guava filling. You can roll it out, cut it in squares, and put it on top of oven-safe bowls that have chicken with gravy and peas and carrots. And that's a chicken pot pie. Cheese straws. For desserts, Napoleons are the classic puff pastry dessert. And that's just basically pastry cream with puff pastry layers topped with a soft fondant, and it's delicious. And you can also make turnovers and hand pies and all kinds of things with puff pastry. The choices are limitless in how you want to use this, but you have to make it. So I hope that this video has helped you see that puff pastry is not as unapproachable as some people may think, and that you actually can do it yourself at home. And it's cheaper. Like I said, it's cheaper now. So I hope you try out this recipe. You can find the full recipe on my site, senseandedibility.com. I'm going to link it down below. I would love it if you would like this video, if you liked it, because, I'm not trying to, guilt you into doing something you don't. I mean, if you didn't like it, then we need to talk, but I think it was pretty good. So please like this video and don't forget to subscribe to my channel and sign up for notifications so that you can get notified every single time I post a new video. And remember, the puff pastry playlist, that was gangster. Like I should be a rapper at this point. The puff pastry playlist is going to feature all puff pastry recipes so that you can actually put this puff pastry to use. Thanks for watching, and I will see you on the next video, but don't click out too soon because you know I always got outtakes. Bye. I need more coffee. And in today's video, hi, my name's, hi, why am I so stupid? Hi again, my name is Marta and I am the chef. Oh, and that wasn't connected at all. You guys, look what I just did to my bowl. Jeez.